This is Dan Schneider on this Dan Schneider video interview. Another of my actors on acting shows. Brad Maule is the man before you. He's an actor of stage and screen. He's probably best known in America, though, for his role of nearly a quarter century on the American soap opera General Hospital. And the conversation will begin in a moment. Brad Maule is my guest. This is another of my actors on actors interview. So as I usually like to do, I want to turn over for the first few minutes to talk about his childhood, his background growing up. So welcome, Brad. And with a last name like Maule, can I assume that you're from a Gallic background?
I don't know where I'm from. There is a town in France named Maule, so possibly I'm French.
How about your mother and father? How did you're originally a Texas native. Were they Texans that came out, or people that came out to Texas in the mid-19th century? Are you from cowboy stock?
Yes, I think we can trace back to the early 1800s in Texas.
Uh-huh.
Came from, I believe, the East Coast down into Tennessee, across to Texas. Very traditional.
Yeah. Well, now, currently you're a professor at Stephen F. Austin University in Nacogdoches, which is close to the, I guess it's the Louisiana, or is it the Arkansas border? Louisiana. So are you from East Texas? Because that's, from what I can tell on the maps, all piney woods up there. It's not what most people think of Texas.
Right. No, I'm from West Texas originally, and was born on a farm. Raised, we had a small school, 150 people in 12 grades, and one of my sisters graduated in a class of 4.
Yeah.
So it was a very tiny school in the country. But when I went off to college, I wanted to go somewhere where there was pine trees and all that good stuff, and so I went to East Texas.
How about how far west in Texas were you raised? Because I know I visited Big Bend. I haven't gotten as far west as El Paso, but what part of West Texas were you from?
Well, if you look at the map, where the map makes a 90-degree turn in West Texas between New Mexico and Texas, I'm from about 100 miles inside that area there.
Yeah, that's pretty parched land, the Trans-Pecos.
Yes, it's very dry, flat.
It's interesting. I know my wife and I have traveled from Fort Stockton up through Loving, Texas, I think it is, and then on to Carlsbad. And it's really weird because the Texas part is so dry, but then once you cross over the border into New Mexico, I guess they irrigate better, it becomes green, and it's almost surreal, the difference there in the landscape. And I think Loving, Texas is one of those towns that was an oil town, and when we drove through it, I mean, it's a ghost town. I mean, these large metal, the oil things that go up and down like that. I mean, it looks like post-apocalyptic Mad Max territory.
Well, it just depends on the price of oil. If the price of oil goes back up to $100 a barrel, then it look like Boomtown.
Yeah.
So it's feast or famine in West Texas.
Yeah. So, being that dry, were you someone who was more active outdoors? Were you riding on horses as a boy, or were you someone who was studious? Were you always thinking? Were you more artistically leaning?
No, I was a ranch kid, a farm kid.
Yeah.
So that's I plowed, rode horses, worked cattle, did all that. But I always had an interest in. We got a television when I was 5, and I'm very interested in the television and wondered. I used to look out the back, follow the wires to see where it went.
Yeah. Were you getting stations from El Paso, or was it from the New Mexico or Midland, Odessa area?
It's actually Abilene and Sweetwater, that area.
Okay. So
very small television stations.
Yeah. So did you? Because you were born in the early 50s, so you would have grown up, I guess, with very few channels on television. Were you then, did the family go to movies a lot? Was this sort of like Last Picture Show kind of era, Larry McMurtry?
Yeah, it was. In my childhood, my older sisters and brother were ordered to take me to town on Saturday mornings and they would drop me off at the movie at 10 o'clock, and then I watched the same, usually two movies in a cartoon, all over and over until 10 o'clock that night when they would pick me up and take me home. So my introduction to movies was not, giant or wonderful classic films. It was more like beach blanket bingo.
I know you've also been a singer and a performer. Did you watch a lot of the variety shows on television? Did you want to, get up and be singing with Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack kind of thing?
No, we were country people, so we watched a lot of Bonanza. We watched whatever my father said we could watch.
So, how about your childhood in school? You mentioned it was a small school. Was this sort of like we think of Little House on the Prairie or the Waltons, where kids are going to country school and all the grades are mixed up, or were there definitive grades?
All 12 grades.
Yeah.
In one building. And I joke, but I always say I was sort of the fine arts department. There was a talent show once a year, and I sang in it from the time I was in the second grade on, once a year. And that was all I did. I would, work and be a kid and do all that other stuff, but I was always waiting for the talent show to happen.
So let me ask about your parents. Were your father? You said you owned a piece of property. Was your mother more encouraging for things beyond just taking care of the animals and that kind of thing? Where do you think, if you look for your later spark in wanting to act or perform, where do you think that came from? Was that natal to you, or do you think it's something that you ran in your family, perhaps?
It didn't run in my family.
No.
My family was all about hard work, and my mother was all about making sure that everybody did their homework, made straight A's, and went to college. So the show business aspect was an aberration. It was just something I was always born wanting to do stuff like that.
So by the time you hit your teen years, you said all 12 grades, I guess including high school, is all smushed together. How did that would seem kind of odd, especially as you got older, having to be taught with the younger kids. Was there a way that, like, kids that were older, as you were getting into the high school years, the traditional high school years, did you sort of act out? What was it like in that area? Because I know I live in the Austin area now, but if you go out even just 50 miles or so to Lano or something, you could understand why young kids would feel kind of hemmed in, because there's not a whole hell of a lot to do there. And I think even farther west in Texas, 50-some years ago, would be even more like that.
Well, it may be misunderstanding. It was a building, but each class level had a separate classroom.
Okay.
So it's not like you were mixed in with them. You just, in the hallways, you would see different people. I don't think it was a bad situation. I mean, there was a lot of peer pressure from both, the older kids. You were supposed to be a mentor or a example to the younger kids, and the older kids kind of kept you in line. So I really think it was more like a small private school, really, if you look back on it. And I had a very major tragedy in my 12th year, I guess, 13 years old, when most kids maybe start acting out a little bit. My older brother passed away over the course of a year, and after that I was not encouraged, but I was sort of left to my own devices. So I left home when I was about 14 and moved in with my grandmother about 20 miles away to a bigger town. And so I pretty much was on my own from 14, 15 years old.
Were you working then, like doing part-time jobs after school?
No, I still worked on our farm, but I went to school in the bigger town.
Right.
And, I was pretty much left to my own devices as to what you do and don't do. And I didn't get in any trouble. I was a good kid. So.
Yeah. By the time you hit that age, though, did you have an idea that you wanted to perform? Did you want to sing at the county fair or act in a local production?
Yes. The reason I went up there was because the bigger school had theater and musicals and different stuff like that. So I had more outlets for my creative process.
Did you initially want to be a singer more than an actor, or an actor more than a singer, or was it just being on stage and having eyes fixed upon you and being able to make the crowd go ooh or ah or something?
I think it was, I wanted to move to Los Angeles. I wanted to be a bigger part of the world. So, are you having difficulties there?
No, I'm just looking on your biography listed on Wikipedia.
Oh, I see. No, I mean, I was always headed toward some form of show business, but I didn't have I sang, I acted, I did everything. I just was looking for an opportunity.
So where did you go to college, and did you go to study acting then?
No, I went to college to fulfill my family's desires, really. I mean, I was taught from, birth on that we needed to be college-educated people. It was our duty to climb the ladder of society, whatever. Because we were just country people. My father left school in the 8th grade. My mother, I think, maybe got through her junior year in high school. We were poor people, and it was we were just brought up better than everybody else did. So my sisters and I and my brother until he passed away were always, they were either the valedictorian, salutatorian. I was probably the lowest accomplishing kid of the family, and I made straight A's.
So when you got to college, then were you studying just business, or did you know then that you wanted to?
No, I majored in theater and English.
So what were some of your first roles then? Did you try out for? What did you prefer, Shakespearean, or did you prefer modernists?
I knew nothing. I just auditioned for whatever shows there were. I did Hamlet. I did Antigone. In college you do sort of classic kind of things. I did a musical, Fiddler on the Roof, back then, and I was just and it was just like my career. I was always kind of open to whatever there was. I wasn't a specialist at anything.
Mm-hmm.
Played guitar, sang, had a folk group, organized the first Earth Day in my little country town, which wasn't very popular.
So when did you decide to strike out for Los Angeles? Did you complete your 4 years at college and then just pack everything up and do the traditional, wing it for, do you have a 5-year Stalin plan to make it or not, or what?
I didn't have a 5-year plan. I graduated from college. I did a summer stock that summer, and then the night the show closed, which was, I believe, Godspell, I packed up my car, had $600, and I drove to Los Angeles. And didn't know anybody, just arrived and said, "Here I am." And I had $11 left when I got my first job.
And what job was that? Was it doing a commercial or something?
It was actually touring with a folk group called the Serendipity Singers.
Oh, okay.
And they were famous, but they were at the point in their band life where they just hire musicians, and you just the name is all that's famous, not the people.
So what year was this? The early 70s?
Yeah, it was. Yes, middle 70s, I guess.
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
So how long did you do that? And were you touring to make money? And then were you going out? Did you have how long did it take to get you an agent? And were you doing like, you know, the McDonald's or the Burger King commercial or here or
You
there?
know, I was on the road for a year in a motorhome and a bus and stuff. Just, I consider that show business education because for an extra $50 a week, I became road manager, which you shouldn't do that. but that meant that we do a show in a town, pack up the equipment, load the motor home, drive all night, and then sleep for a few hours in the morning, unload the equipment, do a show, pack it up, climb back in the bus, drive all night. And my job as road manager was if there was a flat, everybody else would sleep on the bus while Brad went and called a tow truck or got it fixed. Mm-hmm. So by the end of that year on the road, like I'd been to Vietnam or something. It was just like, it's hard work.
Well, did you, after that gig, did you start getting acting jobs then, or were you looking more towards music then as perhaps a career?
Well, I got fired or replaced or whatever in Hawaii, so I was left stranded in Hawaii, and I lived with a girl, and she was also with the band, and she quit with me. And we were stuck in Hawaii, and we found a show called Happy 200, which was celebrating the bicentennial of America, or whatever. And that ran for about a week. And then we were still stranded in Hawaii, and Don Ho heard about us. Two, white kids, Haole kids, that performers, and he hired us both as backup singers. And we spent one more year in Hawaii as backup singers for Don Ho.
Wow. And it's interesting. You never have guessed who would have known each other. And for those who don't know, Don Ho had a fairly popular television show in the 1970s that I guess emanated from Hawaii. Were you ever on his television show singing backup?
Possibly. That was excuse me. That was around the end of the time. We were in the live show, which was at the Reef Hotel, I believe it was, and we did 2 shows a night. And then along about that time when this TV show came on is when I decided it was time for me to move back to Los Angeles and to be in show business. But I think we did the pilot or maybe a couple of early shows.
So did you move back with the girlfriend, or did you break up and go to LA by yourself again?
Yeah, by myself.
Yeah. So this would have been, I guess, maybe, what, 77, 78 then?
It's been a long time. I don't honestly know. It was in the 70s sometime. But then I moved to Los Angeles and just worked. I worked dinner theater. I worked free theater. I just worked. And then I got on with Disney. Went to work for Disney. And as a kid of the kingdom at Disneyland, and performed in a musical group called the Disney Company, and I did that on and off for several years, and then amongst that, other shows, TV, and things started happening. But Disney was my first employer and my last employer in Los Angeles.
Well, let me ask about doing stage work. A lot of actors, will do certain types of things. A lot of people nowadays will do voiceover work or whatnot. When you were thinking about, I want to be an actor, was it being on stage? Is that what most actors, they want to be the stage actor? They want to be the Jason Robards? They want to do the Streetcar Named Desire kind of thing? Or was it just catch as catch can for you?
It was catch as catch can. Whatever came along that paid my rent was what I did. I was not a discriminating, my thing is I had a choice. I either made enough to pay my rent and food for the month, or I had to a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
So if a dinner theater called, I did dinner theater. I just auditioned constantly for everything. And I was lucky because I could sing and I could move a little bit and I could act a little bit. So.
How about getting an agent? Was it? How long did it take you to get an agent once you went out there, or did you just go around to open casting calls?
Well, I went to open casting calls for quite a while. It took probably a year before I got an agent,
Mm-hmm.
and then you sort of start a slow climb up the agency ladder.
Mm-hmm.
After, by the 80s, I was with William Morris and started out with an agent in the mail room. That's how they start there. And then he got to be a bigger agent, and I got to be a more professional working performer. Mm-hmm. So we kind of climbed the ladder together.
So while you were climbing that ladder, were you still doing, say, getting roles, say, in the local LA theater while you were trying out for television?
Yeah, I don't know if it exists anymore. It does to an extent. There was Equity Waiver back then, and which is a theater that seats 100 or less people. So you didn't get paid for it, but you could be a professional actor, one in the unions, and still work for these people. Uh-huh. So I did tons of plays, uh-huh. What I call guerrilla, or alternative theater, I guess, uh-huh. out in Los Angeles. Never getting paid for it, but there was. What I tell my students now is that you create perception versus reality. The mm-hmm. perception was, oh, Brad's so lucky; he just works all the time.
Yeah.
The reality is, Brad's so poor. But I worked for. Looking back, I realized that I worked for 10 years, barely making a living, before I finally crossed that hump where I could breathe a little easier. So it takes 10 years of hard work.
So did you get your union card via that route?
I actually got my union card in Texas before I left.
Oh.
It was very funny. I joined Actors Equity because of a play, and Texas was not a huge union state at the time, so they had a sale, and for an extra $25 you could join AFTRA, and for an extra $50 you could join SAG. So I rolled into Los Angeles being a Actors Equity AFTRA SAG actor, which is almost impossible nowadays.
Yeah.
Of course, you had to make up the rest of the dues out there, but it's like they had a special on it for the weekend.
So let me ask about some of your roles starting out on stage. Do you have 2 or 3 roles that stick out for you, or 2 or 3 performances, or roles that were opposite actors that you learned from? And what I know, I've interviewed other people who said that slogging away there, you can either become embittered or you can use it as an opportunity to learn. Do you have like 2 or 3 scenarios or roles or people you worked with that stick in your mind now? They say, thank God I did so and so play with that person.
Well, I remember doing a show. I did Hamlet in Something's Rocking Hamlet, which was a Canadian musical. And that seemed to bring some attention,
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with Hamlet, really. It was mostly a musical about Hamlet. But I don't know, I guess that made a difference in Los Angeles. And then I did the West Coast premiere of Stephen Sondheim's Marry Me a Little.
Mm-hmm.
And that got me a Drama-Logue Award, which was a local theater award out there. So that got me some attention. And then I got into here's a factoid for you. I was in the first national company of Evita with Patti LuPone. I never opened in Evita. And so I was only in rehearsals in the chorus of Evita in Los Angeles. And I got a guest starring role on Charlie's Angels that I needed to take off 4 days to shoot, and that was my first big television break.
Yeah.
And Hal Prince he didn't tell me personally, I didn't really know the man, I just was rehearsing, but he told them, he said, you have to make a choice. You can either stay with the show and rehearse, or you can take the 4 days off and quit the show. That's your choice. And it was a hard choice to make, because if you stayed in Evita, you'd had probably 7 years of life on the road making good money, and some fame. But I really came out to Los Angeles to be on television, be in films. Mm. And so that was one of those in Sophie's Choice kind of things. I wouldn't put it that serious, but everybody told me, Brad, you've ruined your career. You'll never be on stage again. You've quit a professional production to do some cheesy TV show. But that cheesy TV show made my career, or started it. And later on, it was interesting to me because I had a friend who did a lot of shows, and it turned out that the director was a fan of mine on General Hospital, so it all worked out. He didn't remember that he had actually hired or fired me. I thought that was funny.
Well, let me ask then, because you said that you had wanted to go to LA to be on TV or film rather than stage. A lot of actors have that kind of, I guess it's not as much now, but that kind of snobby kind of thing that the Broadway stage. Broadway is the ultimate nirvana for an actor. If you could, if you can land a Willie Loman type role in a landmark play that opens, that's what a real actor wants to do. So was your the desire to be on film or television more monetarily based, because you could probably make more on just one episode of Charlie's Angels than you could for a month in Evita? Or what was the thinking then behind your rationale?
Well, it wasn't financial, I don't think. In my career, I've been down to the very final four or whatever. I've been, flown from Los Angeles back to New York for the revival of Oklahoma, for Mamma Mia, Claudette, and I can't remember the fourth show. Neither of the last two made it to Broadway. They were on Broadway. They didn't really ever, the open and closed. But anyway, I got down to the final set of people, and especially on Oklahoma, I remember. I was there for 4 days, auditioning every day, me and one other person, me and another person. And it was one of those things, and I was on stage, on the stage where Oklahoma was playing at night to replace the lead for Curly. And I remember thinking when I was up there and I was auditioning, this doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel like my home. And so, I suppose I just wasn't, New York wasn't my trip, and Broadway is not, I don't think, was ever meant for me, even though I was in the same category of being considered. So, just didn't feel right to me.
Well, is that because you think as an actor, perhaps, because when you're on television or film, you can be more expressive. You're going to have close-ups. You can do a little twitch with your face, whereas that won't cut it on the stage. You have to project. You have to be bigger. Willie Loman has to, there's that kind of thing with the excessive movements and projection. Are you more of a subtle person and more of a subtle actor, you think, and that's why you were drawn towards the more intimacy of film or television?
That's possible. I didn't know that, but I am more introverted and more an observer of life rather than a participant.
Yeah.
And I know one time for Oklahoma, they asked me if I could stand more like a cowboy from Texas. And I was like, I am a cowboy from Texas. This is the way we stand. So I said, I think you mean Oklahoma, And so they didn't get my joke. And I've always been, I like the intimacy of a camera.
The reason I ask is because earlier when I was just flipping through my computer, you noticed that, and I know I've interviewed some actors who, when I've talked to them, you can see them looking off into the ether about, bringing back remembrances, but I can see your eyes sort of darting here and there. You're noticing little things. So it's just interesting that it seems obvious to me now, having talked to you and not just seeing you as a character on television, just seeing through a camera myself. I can extract that from you, or extrapolate that is probably something that you are more comfortable with, the intimacy of a camera.
I don't know. I'm just making sure you don't have a gun.
Excuse me. Well, let's talk about those early roles. We'll talk more specifically about what the roles were. Because I did read, I mentioned before we started, I looked at an interview you did a few years back for a soap fanzine, and it looks like you had some experience performing on stage musically at an awards show. Let me just ask you about that. Well, let me just ask you about the awards show first, and then I'll get to my the musical versus acting performance thing. How did that come about that you were invited to play on an awards show, a musical awards show?
Well, remember I told you that my agent and I climbed the ladder of fame together, and he was, because William Morris packages shows, he was the agent on the American Movie Awards for the year of the movie Arthur with Dudley Moore. Yeah. That theme song was nominated. Christopher Cross had recorded it. Andy Gibb was the guest that was supposed to sing that night, and he had some personal problems and hadn't shown up for rehearsal that day of the show, and they had already pre-recorded the orchestra in that key for that song, and they needed somebody immediately who could come in that afternoon or that evening and perform that song in front of an audience for this television show. And my agent, who was there, said, I have somebody, he's not a star, just an up-and-coming singer-actor, but he can do this. And they said, well, bring him in, we'll see, we're desperate. So they called me at home and said, can you sing Arthur's theme? And I said, well, I mean, it's on the radio, I'll learn it. I can sing it, And so I went over to the Palace Theater. I believe it was the Palace. It was on Vineland and that area up there in Hollywood. Anyway, I went there. They had me stand in front of the director, and they played the track back that Andy Gibb was supposed to sing to. Yeah. And I could sing it. It was in my key. I could do it fine. And they said, great, let's just do this. So they blocked me. They told me, we're going to start in the back of the theater. The song will begin. Then you walk down here to this set of seats, and they marked a spot, and you sing to them. And then you walk on further on your second verse or whatever, and you stand on this mark and sing to these people. And then you come up on stage and you finish your song. And I said, great. And they borrowed a tux from an usher at the show because I didn't have a tux or anything. They put me in that, and I sat backstage trying to memorize the words just to make sure I was all good with it. And then Roger Moore, the show started. I was taken back to my starting mark backstage or back in the audience. And Roger Moore said, he was the host. He said, in the grand tradition of the show must go on, we have a young understudy who's going to sing this song tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Maule. So I was introduced by James Bond. And I was standing backstage, and this stage manager, she said, my God, what are you going to do if you forget your lines, your words? And I said, we'll just stop tape, and I'll film it over again. And she said, honey, this is live. 15 million people are watching you. Go. And so I walked out there, and I went to my first mark, and I sang, and it turned out it was Lynn Redgrave and Vanessa Redgrave sitting next to each other. I was like a fan. So that made me, put me in shock a little bit. And then I went down a second mark as I was singing, and I don't even remember who was there, but if Lynn Redgrave and Vanessa were on the middle row, I can't imagine who it was I sang to on the front row. Maybe God, I'm not sure. And then I went up on stage and finished my song, and Roger Moore came out and said, "You're a star." You know. So that was it. It was a beautiful night. And they put me in a limo, and they took me to Chasen's Restaurant, which was a very famous restaurant after the show. And all these famous people, Jimmy Stewart, and Betty Davis was still alive. I mean, it was big stars. Mm-hmm. And it was like a fantasy, a dream kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then the evening was over, and I got back in the limousine, and it just so happened that I lived in a $150 a month apartment across the street. So the limo did a U-turn in front of Chasen's and let me out, and I was back to my regular life, doing laundry the next day at a laundromat. But it was a dreamlike night. Yeah. Catch is that the producer, the very famous producer, Gloria Monty, had seen that show that night. And that company, the General Hospital, called the following day and said, "We want to bring you in for an audition." And thus began my life on the subject.
So, we'll certainly talk about General Hospital in more detail a bit later, but I want to just stick with the idea of performing here. As an actor, you're trying to bring oftentimes the internal to the external, so that the recipient, the viewer, can get a sense of who that character is. When you sing, are you in a sense playing a character, or are you just yourself when you're a singer? You know, do you, as you said, you have to hit a mark, you sing to Lynn and Vanessa Redgrave, you hit another mark, sing to some other starlet or whoever it may be. Is that you? Because from what you said, it sounded like you were, probably aware of the moment and probably scared shitless to a certain extent. But so do you have to put on that mask that you do as an actor too to be a singer or performer in that sense?
No, I think the less you put on that mask, the better off you are. Yeah. But even in teaching acting, I forget the terms because I'm not very good with those kind of educational things. But there is you have an awareness of you have to have an awareness when you're performing, because you have to hit your marks, you have to say your lines, you can't just run around screaming. Yeah. You may want to scream, but you can't. You have one part of your mind is capable of doing the things you need to do, and the other part of your mind is deeper and more subconscious about letting the words of a song or a monologue or whatever flow out of you. Mm-hmm. The key to great actors, I think, is to be able to handle those responsibilities at the same time. The very act of picking up a cup of coffee takes an amazing amount. They can't even replicate that in robots or artificial intelligence. The very fluid act of knowing how far the cup is from you, picking it up with the right amount of pressure, moving it gently to your lips and lifting it up. Yeah. That's a very complicated thing that's going on in your brain.
Yeah, a lot of stained robot fronts, I would assume.
Well, I mean, what we take for granted is this incredible ability for our heart to beat and our lungs to breathe, and for us to look at a cup and reach out and pick it up with the, we've had years and years of practice at it from a baby up, and I think actors have to have those years and years of practice in order to be able to do that, and yet at the same time not tell everybody you're acting.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up robots and AI and stuff because the idea, there's an idea going around that the way true artificial intelligence will come around with embodiment, by making robots look more like us so that they get the feel of how far a thing is, rather than just say the HAL 9000 from 2001. And that leads me to question you about acting and sort of what I would call not just acting by memory, rote memorization of the line, but is there an embodiment within acting, i.e. you get rhythms when you're trying to memorize a certain line or something? Do you sort of get the back and forth music of the words the way you would singing? Is it easier, for example, if you have a partner, if you're acting with, say, one of the leading ladies you had on General Hospital, and you're doing a scene, and it's easier to go do the back and forth, or is it easier for a monologue? How much you embody the memory of a scene, in a sense?
Well, anytime that you're thinking about your lines, like I have this line coming up, I'm going to get this, you've already defeated yourself as a true actor. And the same way, when you leave a scene, and I know this from my own personal experiences, when you leave a scene and you're like, that was incredible, you have failed there also. you need to be just to be present and listening and responding, and that's when the audience responds, is when it touches on some general feeling or emotion that they can see depth, or they can see some reality within you. I know that in my teaching of actors, I've learned that people have code words that they don't even know about. It's the words that mean something. Do you have certain words that when you hear them that make you sad or happy? Or like for me, if I hear the word mom, it brings up an entire set of thoughts and emotions and love and things. So if there's somebody that has a line in a show and they say the word mom to me, it has a depth. It rings like a bell deep inside of me. Maybe a little too esoteric to talk about on a television show, but
no. But it's interesting because a fellow that I'd interviewed a couple of months ago, who was on General Hospital around the same time as you, Brian Patrick Clark, and preparing for his interview, I watched when he was playing the bad guy character, Grant Putnam, and that was right around the time you came on the show. And so as I was watching the episodes, and there was about two and a half months worth of episodes, old episodes on YouTube, and first Jack Wagner came on as Frisco, and then about a couple of months later you debuted as his brother. And so because I was watching the Clark for preparation for his interview, I saw your debut, and the thing that instantly struck me that I had long forgotten about as you as an actor is that, especially in those first month or so reacting with Wagner, was you were a great reactor. When Wagner would say something accusatory, because your character debuted with some kind of secret love affair in the past and whatnot, and you could see you pinching your face up in reaction, not even saying things oftentimes as you were being accused of various misdeeds by the Frisco character. And I'm just wondering, to what degree do you think a good actor is a good reactor to other actors?
well, I think it's pretty much all. Our faces mimic the faces opposite us, whether we're aware of it or not. In fact, it's better if you're not aware of it. But when people say something to you, that's what's wrong with most acting. To me, is people will say something, and the other actor's so busy thinking of their line that it's like hitting a blank wall. But if you actually look at somebody and listen, then there are micro mannerisms that come from you speaking to me. My face will mirror it. That's the way we learn to talk, and the way we learn to act, and the way we protect ourselves from the very beginning.
Yeah. So does that ability to pick up a cue and actually look at the other actor, assuming you have a good quality actor acting against you, does that make it easier then for you to act? Does that automatically trigger? Because if you have good writing, oh, of course I'm going to say that. If this person is accusing me of this, I'm going to act in that way.
Yeah, but it's not pre-planned that much.
Yeah.
I don't, like today, I didn't pre-plan. I have a few ideas what it was going to be like to talk with you.
Yeah.
And I tried to think, well, you need to protect this and don't say you don't like that person, that kind of thing, because it lives forever.
Yeah.
But, the quality and the tone of the scene we're doing comes from talking to you.
Yeah.
Because you could have been a very aggressive person, you could have been an unkind person, and you don't come across that way. You're just basically a nice guy who's got an unusual interest in interviewing you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Well, I guess.
Quality.
Let me then just ask in general, and I'll talk more about, as I said, the General Hospital stuff in general. Well, let me just ask, because you did Charlie's Angels and post General Hospital. I assume you, if I'm looking here, you've done some other stuff in the last 15 or so years where, I guess, typical kind of guesting roles. Is it easier, for example, when you have a long-running character, and I think Tony Jones ran for 22, 23 years, or is it easier to come in and do a one-week guest role where, you're a high-powered businessman from Vegas or you're a farmer from Oregon or something? Does it depend on the writing always? Because if, say, your character on a soap opera is in a lull period between stories or between, leading ladies or whatnot, is there a part where it sort of valleys out for you and you just sort of go on autopilot, or is it more exciting if you're doing these little roles here or there? What feeds your acting sense, your acting, I guess, appreciation?
Well, I know that I haven't done many commercials in my life because commercials have to be instant acting, right on the money, and selling stuff. And I'm better if it's a long dialogue between two people, or a long monologue, or a slow-moving thing. I think that's why soap life worked for me, because I loved every day, with maybe a few exceptions. I loved every day of the work. I enjoy working, and I enjoy the depth of a character that comes after 22 years. You can either hate that. It's like having a hit song. You can either sing that song until you hate it, or you can sing it like it's new every day, because it's a different audience loving it. So, and I use this for my students now too. I say, if you're if a soap opera's beneath you, then you probably shouldn't be on one. And I think that's terrible when you act beneath yourself. Because you're honest, like you're on a soap opera, don't be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
To me, it was the finest job I ever had. And I thought that about, Charlie's Angels, and I thought it about, Natalie Needs a Nightie on the dinner theater circuit. I just like working. I enjoy it. After Evolve, when I got off at General Hospital, I never could watch it again, because I didn't think it just wasn't my thing. But when I was on it, I might as well have been doing the greatest dialogue in the world.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Well, let me ask about actors in general, because now you are at, as I mentioned, Stephen F. Austin University in Nacogdoches, Texas. So let me ask about some of the young kids that you may do. You're basically a drama teacher. You're, I guess, the head of the drama department, I guess, or?
No, I actually work. We have a film program here, and I mostly write scripts. I teach a class on filmmaking. We make short films. And then I teach one class for the theater department, which is acting for the camera, which is very completely different than the kids do on stage.
And so, do you get the actors when they're more raw, in a sense, because you're dealing with younger people? Is that different than working with seasoned professionals, other than the obvious that they know more? But is there something about the younger actor that you can think you have more of an influence on, perhaps?
I don't know if I have influence on them. Usually they hear this particular program. They really want to train them for stage, and then as a almost afterthought, by the time they're seniors, they can take an acting for camera class. So I get them filled with the theater, filled with hitting the back row with their voices. And so what I've had to do to change them is I put them almost immediately on camera, on a giant screen, so that they can see themselves being stage actors and yelling and hitting the back row, and they hate themselves. And I said, but on stage, that's wonderful, because you're big and you're working hard. But I can tell them all day long that it won't come across on camera that well, but all I have to do is show them. And kids today have watched so many movies and so much television, and they're so media savvy that they immediately go, oh my gosh, that's what I'm doing wrong. Look at me, and then they start toning themselves down.
Let me ask about the sort of types of actors, and I don't mean method acting versus just showing up and being paid to act. Hitchcock famously was asked, or an actor asked Hitchcock famously, "What's my motivation?" He said, "Your paycheck." But it seems to me that you can sometimes see actors that really have it at a young age. Amongst your leading ladies, when Sarah Brown first came on General Hospital, you could tell she had an ability to embody things that a lot of people her age, I guess she was maybe 19 or 20 when she started on that show, might not be able to do. Then there are other actors that are, you can tell they're seasoned professionals, having watched a lot of the ABC soap operas when a character or an actor would go from soap to soap and play a different character. These are the people that they get on in that first scene. That they've been on a soap opera before. They know how to do everything. They need no grace period. When you've worked with actors, have you noticed that there are some actors that have that natal ability, and others that maybe it takes them a while to get ramped up, either in a scene or maybe takes them a few months to get comfortable in front of a camera?
Yeah, I understand that. It took me 2 years, 3 years on GH to have any kind of breakthrough at all. Because I was scared to death most of the time. I was always constantly trying to control. I was in fact, this was an epiphany I had. I was backstage waiting to go out on a scene one day, and this is 3 years into the show. And backstage, behind the flats and stuff, I was always like, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to say this line, and then I'm going to walk over here, and man, I'm going to knock this home run away, and it's going to make people weep, and it's going to do all of this, and then they'll say that, I was planning out everything. And that day, back behind the stage, I just said, what would happen if I just listened for a change? What would happen if I walked through that door today and wasn't ahead of the game? And my whole life changed. All of a sudden, scenes were different. There was something different, and that's when all the Emmy nominations stuff started coming. Because it took me, I couldn't, I was trying to control the uncontrollable. And when I came here to teach, I didn't remember those kind of things. And I was like, what do you mean you can't act? Just act. Just do it. Say the lines. Learn your lines, say them, and get off stage. That's all I want. And I had to reverse engineer some of those callous thoughts and learn that and says, yeah, you may be a professional, but you're not an honest professional, you know.
Well, now that you are in the position of someone looking at other people getting their acting skills sharpened, if you will, do you look back and say, God, why didn't someone ever tell me that, like you just mentioned? Or why is it easier to sort of deconstruct an actor now that you have done it and you're looking from the outside in, rather than look at your own work, say, oh, I should have done this, I should have listened more, as you said?
I was a terrible actor, you know, and the interesting thing is once you begin to teach acting, you lose all your abilities to act.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a terrible actor now.
Yeah.
You know, there's something about the rawness of just throwing yourself out there it's just wonderful to watch, and you can't be raw forever. I've seen a lot of actors that they'll come in and they'll be just dumb as a stump, but they're wonderful in their dumbness. And then by the second year on a show, they know enough, they know all the tricks, things that people tell them they're good at, and then they're awful for 2 or 3 more years, and then they come back around and they've learned enough, and then they start over being raw again. That's why actors without people get mad. Like some actor will just show up on the scene and they'll cast him, and there's a movie star.
Yeah.
And then there's other incredible actors that have worked for 20 years to be discovered. Both are valid. There's just some people that have it.
Yeah, well, let me just
Volkswagen up, but you can't make it a Ferrari. You know?
Yeah. Well, let me just ask about, because you said that not being at the daily grind, I guess, of acting, you don't think you're a good actor now. To what degree do you think the way an actor's a career arc pans out makes them good or bad? And let me give you an example, because you come from a medium, soap opera, that is pretty much dying now. Who knows if in 10 years there are going to be any soap operas left here in America. But the unique thing about soap operas is you're playing the same character day after day, 250 or whatever episodes a year, 10 times as much work as you would have on a primetime show, and you do that for the 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It seems to me, having watched soap operas, that some actors will just start phoning it in. We won't mention names. I'm a nice guy. Other actors sometimes will leave a show. They'll come back 2 or 3 years later, and you can tell that they don't have that edge that they did when they were, the star of the show or whatnot. I'll use one name, Susan Lucci, because she's sort of a meta actress when she's even now doing these commercials where she's mocking her own character. And so it's hard to judge Susan Lucci whether she could have ever have pulled off a real serious dramatic role, because Susan Lucci's Erica Kane character is so meta that it's hard to say. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you think that there are bad habits that actors pick up in certain media? Say if someone's a stage actor, they may pick up bad habits that will just, on a soap opera, in film, be like, oh, it just doesn't work out, and vice versa.
Well, sure you do, because if you get positive feedback for saying dynamite, then you'll say dynamite every time you walk on stage. And I don't blame you, because you end up making thousands and thousands of dollars for your trademark thing. So yes, actors are, we're human, and if you pet us, we're going to do the same thing over and over again. Susan Lucci is a wonderful, wonderful person. I'm not a hangout friend of hers, but I've been around enough and been around her enough that she could have gone many different ways because of the pressure on her. She could have become a bitter actor. She could have self-imploded like some of us did. She could become callous. But instead, she's remained a nice, sensible, self-humor. She has a good a sense about herself. And she makes a positive of everything. So I have nothing but great admiration for somebody that can, because you understand, she's been in the business for what, 30 years?
40,
Whatever,
40 plus.
And she's not crumpled under the fame, or if she has, she did it in the privacy of her bedroom.
Yeah.
Some people can't handle it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Most people can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And still remain a good soul.
Let me ask about doing a long-term character on a soap opera, though, because you spent over 20 years playing the same character, and you weren't ever, like, I guess you would call the first-tier character, like Tony Geary's Luke Spencer or Lucci's Erica Kane. Yours was a secondary or tertiary level character. Is there ever a frustration that comes with certain storylines? Because when I spoke with Brian Patrick Clark, for example, he had told me that when Gloria Monty first hired him, for the first few months he was playing a rather bland role, and he had no idea. She wouldn't tell him what his character would do. Was that similar to you when Tony first came on? Did you know what the direction of the character was going to be? Because eventually you sort of ended up as, for the first 12, 15 years, the resident good guy on the show.
No, I had not a clue. In fact, one of the first days, I mean, they tried to kill me off, and they should have. You know, I wasn't very good, and I didn't know. But one day, it was one of the first weeks or so I was on the show. The director came out and said, "Here's the deal about Tony. He's hard on the inside, but he's soft on the outside." And then he walked away, or she walked away. Then the producer came out and said, "Here's the deal, Brad. Your character is soft on the inside, but hard like steel on the outside." And so every time we shot the scene, I tried to make my little adjustment. I was soft on the inside and hard on the outside. I was hard on the inside, soft on the outside. And both of them would come out between scenes and go, "No, you're wrong." And then I got so frustrated that I finally just sort of gave up. I'm like, I'm losing my job. I'll just try to do it the best way I know how. Mm-hmm. So I did it my way. And then they came out and they were like, "Exactly. That's what we were talking about. They don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. You just do it." And hopefully what happens is at some point there will be a link between you and the audience, some kind of an emotional attachment. Mm-hmm. And that's when the show has no choice but to use you. Mm-hmm. Because people write letters and they're like, when Tony suffers or when Tony's upset or when Tony is hurt, we feel it. Like when I gave my daughter's heart away or something. Yeah. They didn't intend for me. That storyline was for other people on the show, but it's like, you know, my brother had died, and I knew what it was like for a family to suffer the loss of a child. So I didn't consciously reach back into that, but somewhere in my thick head, you know, it came through. Mm-hmm. And sort of made my life on the show.
So is there a part of sort of tapping into something unconscious as an actor? Because as you said, when it clicked with you, was that sort of feeling that you were finally in the character's shoes, that you became that character after 2.5, 3 years finally?
Well, you know, the part of you that the character is, you know, I'm not Tony. I'm not that character. Yeah. But a part of me is that person. And, you know, what people don't realize, I think, a lot of times, is under the light of kind of being famous and stuff, you also have a personal life, and things go up and down, and things implode, and that, you know, that I have great sympathy, like when, what's her name? Britney Spears was imploding, shaving her head and doing all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I felt bad that the public got to witness, I didn't, I just have sympathy for that because she's a sweet kid who just got caught up in huge fame and didn't have enough people around her to protect her or whatever. And she came out okay, but it could have killed her.
Well, let me ask, since you had mentioned the heart scene, and you just mentioned the head shaving with Britney Spears, and your character is probably known. The two most, I guess, Emmy reel nominating kind of scenes are probably the ones where, as you mentioned, the character playing your daughter is killed, and you listen to her transplanted heart and her cousin, and then also a few years later when your character then had a breakdown subsequent to that, where he sort of shaved his head and for a year or so was mentally unstable. Do you, when you see scenes like that, are those scenes that you're proud of, or do you sometimes say, they're good scenes, but I wish people would have remember this other scene kind of thing, because those are the kind of tearjerker scenes that we think of on Emmy reels. And I've always thought that some of the best acting that you can see are the more subtle actings in sort of the bridge moments between the highs and lows of drama.
Yeah, you got no choice on that stuff. You just, like, probably a more self-protective and a better actor would have, when they came to me and said, hey, we need you to shave your head for this scene because we're going to put you off the show eventually. A more smarter actor would have gone, no. But I was excited by it. I was like, great, let's go for the dark side. And then after you go for it, they sometimes use that to their advantage to not save you, but to get rid of you. And that's business decision. It's their thing. Whatever.
Let me ask, you mentioned that you had been nominated for some awards after a few years. To what degree do those awards help an actor? I mean, obviously, if you win an Oscar or an Emmy, that might make you a bit more bankable for a film, or make it easier to get another role on another show or something. Is it really, though, that helpful, say, when you're on daytime to win an Emmy?
No, it doesn't. It helps you in Walmart. As you push your cart through Walmart and shop, people go, hey, no Emmys today? It has nothing to do with your career.
How about...
And it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Yeah. If you're nominated, you win, as far as people in the real world are concerned. Yeah. They don't remember all that stuff.
How about when you've acted with children? Do you find that children are easier to act? A lot of actors, don't want to act with children or animals because they'll steal the scene, kind of thing. Is that something that you've found when you've acted?
No, I mean, probably need to take a Tic Tac because the kid just tells you the truth, So, it doesn't matter to me. You can either act or you can't act, Either listen or you don't. And a kid will call you on it usually, Be like, what'd you have for lunch? Got garlic or something? They're just truthful, honest.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your post-General Hospital career. I'll get into some of the roles in our next segment, some individual roles. But when your character was eventually written off, it's been said on online sites that you requested they kill off the character. Is that true?
That's not really true.
No.
I made a joke about it, use me or lose me kind of thing, but that's not really true.
No.
I love the show. I love being on it. I had some, life issues, personal issues. It was one of those times when they were getting rid of people, and my number came up, and so they spent a good year writing it where I lost popularity with fans, because you cheat on your wife and they break your hand so you can't operate, and you end up kidnapping people and doing all those things, you know, and yeah, you know, they were done with me, and that's okay. It was a wonderful, wonderful time in my life, and but it turned out that I had a much better life waiting for me. I didn't know it at the time, but you know, life has seasons, and if maybe it would have been a different season if I'd have stayed on the soap the rest of my life. You know, that was not a healthy, not the soap. My life at that time was not in a healthy place. So it's good. It was good to go.
So let me ask then about, because you did some roles post General Hospital. How did it come about that you ended up dramatic, you know, the role you have now, a professor teaching theater? Did you just apply for a job like that? Did you know someone in the business who knew someone? I mean, how do you go from being a working actor to being now a professor?
Well, I'll tell you this, I was late for my own first class because I was used to people picking me up and putting makeup on me and telling me where to be. So when I had to go out to the real world again, I just didn't know how to do it. I was notorious for being late. And I was like, well, nobody called me. Nobody picked me up. What's the deal? You know, so, you know, it's kind of funny. No, I live in a town that they take care of their people. And I moved here and was just trying to, you know, get my life back in order and live, figure out what I wanted to do. And there were literally people that said, we should give him a job. and then I could have screwed it up or not. But instead, I loved it. You know, I'd never thought about being a teacher, but I enjoy it.
How long have you been at your current position?
This is my 12th year teaching.
Wow. Okay. So you must have gotten that then just right about the time they were going to write you off, or were you doing both? Were you going back and forth between Texas?
I was doing both. I was flying back and forth. Had a very smooth transition.
And so let me just ask this then, because you mentioned that you don't think you're capable of acting anymore. So there would be, if your agent called up and said, you know, we've got this guest role on so-and-so show, are you now a retired actor then?
Right. I do feature films now, a small part. I've got a film coming out next year called 200 Hours, which is, you know, independent, $2 million, relatively low-budget film. And when they call me, you know, and somebody knows about me, I do stuff. But the fire's kind of gone out. I'm much more excited about writing a script or teaching a class. I just don't have that. I don't have that need anymore.
Well, let's end this segment then, and then my next segment we will talk about some of the roles you did pre-General Hospital, during your soap run, and then post-General Hospital. And we'll do that in a moment. I'm speaking with American actor and now acting professor Brad Maule. We've spoken about his life, also some aspects of acting and teaching acting, but I want to go through some of the roles that he had subsequent to his soap opera role and after. You had mentioned, Brad, that Charlie's Angels was the first show you had gotten. I also see that you did The White Shadow. Were you a basketball player there? It looks like your character was Russian.
I was a Russian basketball player.
Yeah, because Ken Howard was always one of my favorite actors, and that was one of my favorite shows growing up, because it's one of the few shows that showed urban life. Tell me about the experience there, since that's one of your earliest roles.
It was a great one. I still today occasionally that plays someplace, and it makes me laugh because Chris Mulkey is the guest star in it, the lead, and I was the co-star in it. I think he's a wonderful actor. Thomas Carter was in that, I think. He's the director these days. And I played a Russian basketball player. You know, that was fun. I did Too Close for Comfort. quite a few pilots. One Night Band was a pilot I did for CBS.
Uh-huh. I see you also did a Three's Company. Were you more comfortable doing comedy or not? What do you prefer, drama to comedy, or what?
I like comedy a lot. I mean, my Three's Company, I enjoyed it. White Shadow actually was a comedic role. Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, I like it all.
Yeah.
They really like it.
I'm looking at a show here called Romance Theater. It looks like you were in about 5 or 6 episodes. I've never heard of that. Was that a pilot that failed, or?
Well, is really actually what they should be doing with soaps these days. Because you said a while ago soaps are dying or they're not going to be here. Soaps are all over the place on Netflix. They're just 10 episodes, and then they kill everybody off, and they do something else. And that's what soaps ought to be doing now, is like the novellas in Mexico. Yeah. I think they've tried it some. Romance Theater was with John Ritter's wife at the time, Nancy Ritter, and it was for 6 weeks. So and we shot 5 shows per day. It was the hardest work I've ever done because I had never been on a soap, so it was a mountain of dialogue to learn. An hour show 5 times. It was quite an experience for me. And I don't know if it ever played any place. I think it played, on some independent channels and stuff. But I do know that I did a series one time called Up to Aesop, which was a series where we acted out Aesop's fables and sang and danced and did them all. And it was not a great show. It was just a show, And we shot a whole season's worth in about a month. So we shot it down and dirty and fast. And I went to a meeting with, I'll just say, a very famous film director one day, and for an audition. And he said, "There's something familiar about you. Have I seen you in anything?" And I'm like, "Nope, you haven't. No, you haven't." He goes, "Yes, I have." And he said, "I have a 5-year-old son, and every morning with his cereal, we watched you." And I was like, "Oh." And he was very nice. Yeah. But he said, "I hated you, and I enjoyed you because it was time with my son, but it was like watching a kid's show. So it was suffering for me too." And I didn't end up. Val Kilmer got the role actually, but.
Well, I also see that you did an episode of a show that I thought was a terrific comedy that didn't last in the mid-'80s called Buffalo Bill with Dabney Coleman. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah. It was Gina Davis was on it, and Dabney Coleman, and he had a talk show on the show, and he introduced me that I played my guitar and sang a song like I was a guest on his show, and he made fun of what a hick I was. And I mean, he had a pretty acerbic sense of humor. Yeah. And he treated my character as such, but it was a fun day for me.
Well,
I also sang. Here's who's the Joel Schumacher who directed the Batman, the one with Jack Nicholson and all those guys. He did a TV series or a mini series or a movie on TV called Dixieland, The Last Night at Dixieland Cafe and Bar, or something like that. And Amateur Night at the Dixieland Bar and Grill. This was a TV movie in the 80s. And he needed somebody to sing like country and yodel and do stuff. And he heard about me, and so rather than meet with him, he phoned me, and he said, "I hear you can sing and yodel." And so I did it. I sang amateur night, whatever, on the phone with him. And he said, "Be in the studio tomorrow. We're going to." So, without ever meeting him, without ever seeing him or anything, I sang, if you ever see that movie, TV movie, that's me singing the theme song of the show. Minor stuff.
Just for the record, it was Tim Burton
6 degrees of separation with famous people.
Yeah, Tim Burton actually directed the first 2 Batmans. It was Schumacher who did, I think, the infamous Batman with Clooney that had the nipples on the show.
Yeah. I just knew him as, I think he had done some pretty big films and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I want to just sort of elide over the General Hospital years and do that at the end, since that's the longest role you had, and talk about now some of your post-GH work. It looks like you did a few minor roles on some other soaps too. I see you played a role on Passions, and I know my wife had watched that back when they had, I guess, the infamous Doll Boy story. Were you involved in that? Because that was a really wacky soap opera.
No, there was, after the GH stopped using me, to the point that I could, the thing is, as long as your character's alive, you can't really be on any other shows. That's just kind of an informal blacklist. If your Dr. Tony's still around, you're not going to work. But after they killed me off, there wasn't ever any. I did a few days on Young and the Restless and a few days on Passions and stuff. But the only real significant work that was out there for me at that time was Seventh Heaven, where I played Ashley Simpson's dad. And that role kind of sparked. I was just supposed to do one show, but it was funny and it worked out. And for whatever reason, I ended up doing about 16 episodes as a guest star on that.
Okay, I was going to mention that.
There's something terrible about being in Hollywood after you've been on a series, though, where whenever you walk in the room, they're like, "Yeah, you're Dr. Tony."
Yeah.
No. You're just... So that's why I thought, I'm going to move somewhere else and start a whole new life.
Yeah.
Because there's no... How many... And I use this in my teaching also. You can name your favorite sitcom or television series from when you were young, and I bet you there'll only be one person on it that made a living after that series went off the air.
Yeah, that's.
You can cite Happy Days or whoever.
Yeah, that's true. Unless you're someone maybe like a Vivian Vance who's lucky enough to do all the shows with Lucille Ball afterwards.
Or Mark Harmon.
Yeah.
Mark Harmon just work and work and work.
Yeah. Oh, why do you think that is? Let me just digress for a moment. Why do you think it's so difficult for producers or directors to get beyond what we call typecasting? Is it just part of the human biases that we have?
Partially, but there's also people that are just like solid, dependable, stable, good actors, that they're on the network list, and once that series goes off, there'll be another one waiting for them in 6 months or a year. Mm-hmm. They're just on the list, and most people are not on that list. And you never will be.
Yeah, I remember reading an anecdote once, and I forget the name of the actor, but some producer said, what I really need is a actor A type or whatever, and the director or whatnot said, well, actor A is available. Why don't we just get him? Do they think in that kind of way that we need that type, all the time?
Yeah, but it's I don't know. A casting person one time said to me, "Brad, we're actually looking for a young you." I was like, well, nothing I can do about for you there,
Well, let me ask, because I see on your list of credits here on IMDb a handful of short films. Were these maybe college shorts that you did with some of your students?
Probably. I don't know the names.
I'll give you some of the names. One says Innocence Way, the short, you played Father Ben. Stay With Me, you played the radio man. The Appointment, played Judge Greg D. Watts. Papa
Right.
Bear. You played an ER doctor. Waiting for Renault. Judge Renault.
Yeah, these are all short films made for film festivals. That some are former students, some are independent film people. The films, there is one film on there called The Crow that I did out for AFI in Los Angeles many years ago, and I think his name was Manny. Anyway, the person that wrote it and directed it later on became quite the writer. I think sold some pretty major scripts and stuff, but most of that's just stuff I've done here.
Yeah. Well, let me ask before I go talk about your General Hospital role more in depth. Let me just ask about you're in your mid-50s, mid-60s rather now, so you're at the age of retirement coming up. I would assume that all the years on General Hospital, you've fully qualified for a good solid pension when you decide to retire. Let me ask about the actors' unions. I know most of the actors that I've spoken with are pretty outspoken that it's one of the better unions to be in. What are your thoughts of SAG and after now one union, Actors Equity, as how it affects the life of an actor and or the ability to get jobs? What are some of your thoughts for young actors?
Well, by the very nature of performers, they're not thinking great business people. So the unions have done a wonderful thing in if you work for a long time, they do help you at the end. It helps. But I was just thinking about this yesterday. I wish that, like, I get residuals, but they're in the 28-cent range, $1.43,
yeah,
and not even honestly enough to take your time to go to the bank and cash.
Yeah.
What I wish is they would come up with some way that you could say all future royalties under the amount of $20 go to a charity, and just let people have that option to sign off on those kind of things. Or the other option is to gather up all of those royalties and give you one check per year, which might amount to $70 or $50. After you retire and you're done with your career, because it's really silly to me at least, to spend all that money it costs to print a check, the accounting cost, and all of that. It really costs $20 to $30 for SAG-AFTRA to print a check for 28 cents.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be a good money-saving device and a charitable thing. The other thing is, I'm very sorry that SAG and AFTRA's pension plans didn't join with each other.
Oh.
Because you can work 9 years in SAG, and all that money is there, but you can't touch it, nor will you ever get it, because you're not vested. And so if they combine those, you'd have actors that worked AFTRA and worked SAG, because it's one union now, and those would all be put into one pot and would be vested.
So you mean you could have 9 years of monies accrued in one union or the other, and you don't have the ability to touch that?
Right.
That's couldn't whoever runs for the next union president? I mean, that would seem to be something all actors should support.
It seems like a no-brainer to me, but apparently it touches some pretty sensitive pockets of power somewhere.
Well, let me turn to.
Or maybe it's just something they're working toward and haven't quite got all together yet.
Yeah, isn't who's the current head of SAG and AFTRA now? It wasn't the gal from Little House on the Prairie running for it, the actress?
I'm not very political.
Oh, okay, but I remember she, I think, was running for it. Oh no, I think it's the woman who used to be on 90210, Gabrielle Carteris. I think she's the new head of the union. But I don't know, maybe to send her a letter or something. But
I don't have anything bad to say about them. They've done wonderful things for older actors. I'm just saying that there are things they could still do.
Yeah, noted. So let's turn a little more sanguine. I've touched upon some of the outer layers of your 20-plus year role on General Hospital, and I would say probably 99 out of 100 people who would watch this would know you from that role primarily. Um, I mentioned how I had watched some of the first few months of you on there when I was preparing for another interview. I was looking up at one of your other online interviews, and did you try out for the role that eventually went to Jack Wagner?
Yes, that's what they called me in for.
Yeah.
My role was not in. It was they hadn't invented it or whatever. They kept calling me back. They said, "You're too old for this role. We want a young guy." I was 30 years old or whatever, and they were like, "Well, no, we want somebody that's 25 or something, and he's going to get a record deal, and we need him to be a rock and roll singer." And yet, there was just something about the auditions. They just kept saying, "Well, you're not going to get this role, but come back tomorrow." Mm-hmm. And I guess it was cooking percolating, because Gloria Monty was a real smart cookie, mm-hmm. in terms of she could see something and you know, that they had plans, I guess.
Yeah. So you get the role then as because the Frisco character was basically a character seemingly created to fill the void by the then leaving John Stamos, because he was the Tiger Beat pinup character for the show, and then Jack Wagner sort of took over that role, and you came on as his older brother.
Right, I texted with John Stamos. Oh, yeah? He was the actor opposite me in the screen test.
Ah, okay. So your character, when it came on, did they tell you? Well, you know, your character was initially going to have troubles with the role of the Jack Wagner character, but then that plays out after a couple, 2-3 months. And did they have any long-term vision for your character? Because this was really the golden age of soap operas. This was just in the wake of the Luke and Laura phenomenon. Then you'd have Tristan Rogers, I guess, was the top dog on the show, basically at the time. And you had the gal who played Holly Sutton, the Emma Samms. She was big on the show. So your character was sort of at the second or third level of the characters. Did they plan back then the characters, a 6 months out, a year out arc? Because today it seems that a lot of the soaps are just flying by their seats, whereas it seemed that the stories were much more well constructed back then.
Well, possibly. I think the world changes a lot faster nowadays. When I first came on, I don't think they had a year plan, but they wanted to see how it would mix out, how Jack and I would get along, what the dynamics of it were. And I think they honestly didn't think it was working out, which is why they killed me that first year. I think in the producer's mind, it's like, yeah, he's not that good, and we don't have that many plans for him, but it will be a big show if we kill him. And they did. They shot me in the head and the heart. But what they didn't, I don't think, realize is that the fans had made that bond connection. And I certainly was glad. I didn't want to die. Nobody likes to die.
To what degree, then, do fans have an influence over soap operas? Because it seems to me, like you said, if the fans helped save your character, nowadays with social media, it seems that the soap operas are even more tone deaf. Is there a difference, do you think, between getting just emails and getting full sacks of mail that say, "Don't kill off Tony"? You know, if you have a 15, 20-pound sack of mail, you know, with 2,000 letters that say, "No, Tony's he's my favorite hunk on the show."
It's a blessing and a curse to the networks. The blessing was that they found out, you know, what people felt. The curse was sometimes it didn't go with their plans.
Yeah.
For what they had for people. And strangely enough, the 9/11 and the paranoia that came with that and correct paranoia, but when they started scanning the mail and not reading it anymore, when it became an issue that it might be some kind of terroristic threat or whatever, that's when snail mail became obsolete.
Yeah.
And so they don't get that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure people still write fan letters, but it's a rare day that it would actually be dumped on the front door of a studio for them to say, "Here's a sack of mail for you."
That's an interesting
nobody
point.
writes anymore, you know.
Yeah. Well, let me ask, because I looking at that online interview, it said that your favorite of your many female co-stars, leads, I guess you would, was Hillary Edson, who was, I think, the first romantic interest that your character had on the show. Did you have a special kind of acting chemistry with her that you didn't have with some of the later women that they paired you up with on the show?
Well, it's not fair to say that I had one person more favorite than the other. I've been very lucky, and I cared deeply. I mean, I enjoyed. Jackie and I were married for 10 years on the show, and we're still good friends, and I adored her.
And Jackie Zeman, just so people who don't know, Jackie Zeman is the actress's name.
Is Bobby.
Yeah.
Bobby Spencer. And Lucy Coe, Lynn Herring, was a wonderful person. And, you know, and I mean, I've wanted to work with everybody. The difference was Hillary and I are still great friends. You know how we were both on the show at that young stage where you bond, and we bonded, and we don't see each other. You know, we'd send Christmas cards or whatever, but she's like family to me.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, I love her as a human.
Yeah. Is she also working still, by the way? I don't know.
No, she was on Guiding Light, I believe, or As the World Turns, Another World. She's out of New York, so for several years, got Emmy nominations, and she's happily married and is, you know, lives a wonderful life.
Well, speaking of that, though, how hard is it to get, or is it easy to break out of the quote-unquote ghetto of soap operas? Because you'll often see the biggest stars, like a Lucci or a Geary, don't ever seem to become they don't get the primetime show that becomes a hit for 5 or 10 years. They don't get the feature film roles, whereas someone who maybe only is on for 2 or 3 months and their character is written off may be able to break through, because they don't seem to. Is there still that mindset, do you think, about soap opera acting, or has that gone away now?
Well, James Franco would beg to differ, probably.
Well,
you know, he just seems to float like you know, he floats like the stars through everything.
But he did Spider-Man before he was on General Hospital, though. You know, I mean,
yeah. Well, but there's Jonathan Jackson and Demi Moore and Kevin Bacon and Susan Sarandon, I guess. I mean, there's lots of people. Fame, and especially movie stardom, picks you. You don't pick it.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, it's like if Brando had been born now, I'm not sure Brando would have been the big star that he became in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
You have to be born under the right set of times.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned working with Jackie Zeman, and Jackie Zeman was one of the most notable female actors from the 1980s in soap operas. Your character was tied to her, as you said, for about a decade. Your character had. Do you find that these associations with characters, when you were doing General Hospital, did people come up to you and you know, like when your character had a bad turn or something, and they want to slap you, or do you find that there are a lot of fans that have a difficulty separating Brad from Tony?
No, not really. I mean, that's a good story that people tell, but you know, people would come up and tell me when they were mad at my character. But you know, 99% of soap fans are just regular people. There's 1% it's maybe a little wacky, but
Yeah.
My father actually enjoyed it. He used to walk into the cattle sale, the cattle auction back in Texas, and the auctioneer oftentimes would go, "Well, there's that old Dr. Tony's dad right there." He loved that. He loved that his weird show business kid had finally made it to the cattle sale. So,
what was your most enjoyable storyline, do you think, on your 2 decades plus there? And what was the storyline you're most, I guess, proud of as an actor that you think you gave the best performance over the course of weeks or months? And I mention them as two separate things, so they may not all be the same thing in your mind.
well, some of the best times were Jack Wagner and I were we just had a golden period where we were trusted as actors, and oftentimes they would say, "Look, you guys just sit here, and here's kind of what we want you to do, and you guys just talk about it, okay?" So they would let us go off script, and they just trusted us enough to be able to pull it off. Jack's a really just terrific guy to work with. So that was and we were both new to the thing, and it was a kind of a golden period.
Mm-hmm.
The whole period, the few days actually where BJ died and gave her heart away, is the one that people seem to see most often and talk to me about, and that was sort of an interesting time, because I was like, all of a sudden People magazine was calling me rather than publicists trying to get me in those magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that would be it. I mean, it's all been fun. It's all been interesting. Some of it terribly sad, some of it terribly wonderful.
As an actor on soaps, especially back in the 80s or 90s, oddly, there were more love scenes back then when they had the tagline "Love in the Afternoon" than they do now. So you were more likely to see hunks, rippling muscles back then, and bodacious babes back then than you are now. Did you enjoy doing the love scenes? Obviously, you're going to be with attractive women in your skivvies or whatnot. But as an actor, did you enjoy doing that, or is there a kind of forced intimacy when you do those kinds of scenes that, as an actor, you're like, I don't want to really do that?
Well, first of all, what you do best is what you do over and over on a soap, and I was best at being hurt and in the hospital. So I'm not the guy in the, I'm not the hunk. Yeah. I'm a soap chunk. And if you've ever been on a set, there is no intimacy on a set when you're in bed or you're in a car or anything. It's 50 to 100 people standing around you, pointing and taking, making sure every hair is in place. So I think most actors would tell you a love scene is one of the most arduous days of work they'll ever have, because your face can't be all smushed up, and love is a really ugly thing, but not on TV or in film. Yeah, love is beautiful and lit well.
Yeah. I want to turn to the last few years of your character, and then I post on a soap opera board, and I know some people I told that I was going to be interviewing, if you would, maybe a handful of questions that they wanted to ask that they never knew about the character. But you mentioned how the last few years, your character, eventually, you sort of, I guess, knew that the character was going to be written off. You didn't ask to be written off. Did you, was there a certain point where you, I guess, knew before you knew intellectually that this character had run its course? Was there a point, say in the year 2001, where you were saying, well, I can only see maybe another 2 or 3 years of this character because he's been shot, he's lost his daughter, he's gone through the whole gamut. Other than having him being kidnapped by aliens, and probed, there's not much more that they can do with this character. Or do you ever get frustrated and say, if only the writers would just engage the character more? If you know what I'm saying, as an actor, do you get the sign of the times that the character has a limited shelf life coming up?
Well, I think every actor is eternally hopeful.
Yeah.
And you always think, just give me one more swing at it and all that kind of stuff. But it's only afterwards, years afterwards, that you look back and you go, oh, the writing was on the wall the whole time.
Yeah.
The one thing that I have issue with is that you're always family. Everybody tells you you're family. But families go through rough times, and I think if they had stood by me, I would have paid off for them.
Uh-huh.
But you're only family until they're done with you.
Yeah.
And then you're not family anymore. And I regret that.
Yeah. The thing I know with you and also other characters and actors is there always seems to be, and I guess because we're talking a popular medium, that certain actors catch on, male or female, and I know I've asked some other actors too. Nowadays with Twitter and whatnot, some actors are cast in roles because they have a large Twitter base or a fan base on Facebook or whatnot. Do you think that do you regret that maybe they didn't test you more? Do you sometimes wish that I could have pushed myself to a 95 or a 98 out of 100, but they only wanted 75,
No, I don't have any of those kind of things.
No.
I was on the show during a great transition in terms of television, in terms of soaps. The O.J. Simpson trial gave them the opportunity to take off, things that they would never touch before. So it was a transition time. It was what happened in 2008 financially to the people in the country happened to television people in 2001 and 2. So they were a little ahead of their time in terms of paring down, culling down, getting rid of those that aren't making them as much money.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're born into a certain time. I had, for a kid that had a dream, I had a wonderful career. And and I still have a life. So I have a wonderful life right now. Mm-hmm. And that's really the point of it. If the point of your life is to be, on the Drudge Report or in the Daily Mail every day in the celebrity section, then you have a pretty pointless life in my eyes. Yeah. The whole syndrome of celebrity that has come up now is of a different period. This is their time, not mine. I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. You mentioned O.J. Simpson. I spoke with another actor who was on GH, who played A.J., Sean Kanan. Do you think that the O.J. Simpson trial was sort of the beginning of the end for soaps? He seems to think that that real life soap opera, if you will, was the beginning of the end for scripted soaps.
Yes, and it coincided with the rise of reality TV. Yeah. And now, even reality TV does not satisfy our craving or our addiction for that's why we crave news, we crave real stuff, and so they invent it for us most of the time now. It's just a different time. I was reading a book called The Age of the Image. And in that, since about 1995, with the age of the internet and YouTube and all Facebook, all this stuff, it takes 8 years of television content for every one day in life right now.
Yeah.
Because, used to you just watched a show and you had a favorite show on. But now, we're on the internet or on watching YouTube videos or whatever we're watching, video games, 8 to 10 hours a day. So I'm not convicting it. I'm just telling you it's a different world.
Okay. Well, let me ask a few questions that some people had asked me to ask you, and you may not remember some of the character traits. So if that's so, just say so. One of the questions was, what did you think about your character Tony's dark turn after the affair with the Carly character played by Sarah Brown? Was that a challenge for you? What was?
Well, I think it's a sad thing. I didn't like it.
No.
And it was a betrayal of a character they created. But I think it was their way of getting the character off the show, and they succeeded.
Yeah. Another question is, they seem to have ended the Tony Lucy marriage rather abruptly, and then they, I think, paired her up with Stuart Damon's Alan character, Alan Quartermain. Was there a reason for that? Was the Q ratings, was that just not a popular coupling?
Those are mysteries that go on some other place than us,
Okay. Did you ever pitch an idea or a story for your character that was shot down?
Never pitched an idea. That's they used to have tape on the floor of the studio that you were not allowed to cross because writers lived there. And it was bad form to be pitching yourself to a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I loved some of the writers would just give you these great gifts.
Uh-huh.
They would write you, they liked your character, and when that happens, that's just golden.
Yeah. Another thing, and this might be a very obscure story that you may not remember, but one of the questions is, did your character, Tony Jones the surgeon, kill the character of Corey Blythe, who had been the character who had accidentally killed the BJ character?
Oh, well, I wrote a song, like a funny, humorous song, but my character would never do that. I mean,
Uh-huh.
My character was, he might have thought about it, but he would have never done it. His better nature.
Well, I have another. Okay, I have a question here though for Brad, not for the character you played. One of the fans said that you had actually, and they linked to a link of you, that you had actually done a clip for a Psychic Friends infomercial, and they wanted to know whether you were paid for that or were you a believer in psychic phenomena?
Well, that television, that was just a paid job. It was just a job.
Uh-huh.
However, I'm a big believer in that we don't live in just one realm. I think, I think our existence is a many multi-layered level of things. And they happen to tap into, they said something about my brother that day. Mm-hmm. So it was emotional for me, and it was real, but not, I don't think and in fact, I think that psychic infomercial said that I was a shoo-in to win the Emmy that year, and I didn't. So, that wasn't good enough, I'll put it that way.
Let me just ask another question they have here. This question is about a pivotal moment in your life. Can you identify a job not taken or taken, any advice or a conversation that that influenced you the most in your life as first, say, an actor and now as a teacher?
Yes, well, once I learned the expression "the dark night of the soul,"
yeah,
things made a lot more sense. That everyone has a dark night of the soul, and once I learned that I wasn't alone, everybody has. Your life is not perfect. Your life is not just one flat, little, wonderful progression. Mm-hmm. That was a pretty stunning thing.
Well, let me just wrap up the interview by asking a couple more questions, and then we'll just close out with anything you want to talk about that maybe we haven't talked about. So overall, you spent over 2 decades on General Hospital. Obviously, that's the most biggest chunk of time you spent there. Is that the work that you're the most proud of? Say, when you look back on your deathbed, say, and is that say, boy, that was that if that was it, or was it one of the other roles, the smaller minor roles that you're most proud of?
Well, first of all, I'm not a person that looks back very much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are always telling me stuff, and I'm like, don't remember it at all. I'm most proud that I survived Los Angeles, because Los Angeles in big time show business it's a tough business, and I had a good portion of my life out there, and because of it, I have 2 wonderful kids, and I'm probably most proud of them.
When you were on the soap, did you participate in a lot of those soapy kind of events, fan events on the weekends? And how were they? Were the fans mostly,
Well, I
good?
loved
Yeah,
I loved them.
yeah.
I mean, I used to fly a lot to do meet and greets and autograph sessions and stuff, and that's when you really, I like people, so that was very enjoyable to me. Made lots of friends.
Uh-huh.
And I enjoyed people like Sean Kanan and Steve Burton. We used to do a lot of personal appearances together. Ken Schreiner.
Yeah.
Those people, nice, good, solid people, fun to be around.
And I guess the final question then regarding the soaps, because I don't know if you specifically mentioned it, was there any particular scene, I guess, that stands out? I mean, we mentioned the B.J. Hart scene, and then the head shaving scene. You said you weren't fond of that storyline, but is there any kind of scene or working with someone, who knows, maybe Anna Lee, working with Anna Lee, if you ever got to work some with her, is there any really day of work that really sticks out with you, that boy, I really enjoyed working with maybe Stuart Damon in that scene or something?
Well, Stuart Damon and Leslie Charleston, wonderful people.
Uh-huh.
Always great to work with. One day that sticks out in my head was B.B. King was on the show as a guest.
Yeah, he was going to Luke's Club or something.
Yeah, and and I was just another one of the people there, but we sat at his feet between scenes all day. I don't know how long it took, but it was all day of work. And it was just a golden day. He was like your grandfather, sitting there with his guitar in his hand, playing songs and talking to you, and that was a wonderful day.
Well, let me just ask a final question then in general, and this is one I usually ask most of my actors that I've interviewed. If you have any advice for young actors, whether it's technical advice, whether it's personal advice, how to save your money so that you don't blow it all on your first hot streak or whatever, what would you say to actors coming up, whether they are doing whether they're just starting out in, say, voice acting, or whether they are doing commercials, or whether they've gotten a role on stage, or whether they, get a role in a film in their first year or so? What would you say as a veteran to them?
Well, the tendency in ambitious people is that, and those are the only ones that make it, are the ambitious, hardworking ones, not the talented ones necessarily. There's a tendency to put one foot in your job and have your other foot stepping toward the future. So you're always, even if you're in a show, you're always kind of got that faraway look, looking for something else. That's a natural tendency, but it means that you're only half as good as you could be. And so if you would somehow or another learn to commit fully to whatever job it is you're doing, and let the future sort of take care of itself, you'll be much more famous and much more satisfied. And if I had to sum it up in one line, I'd say the future's not out there. You're living your future right now. And most people don't do that. They always think someday.
Yeah.
Someday. And that's going on right.
Let me just segue from that to my final question. Then, outside of acting, just personally, what is in your immediate future? You did mention you had a small film, a small indie film that was coming out next year. Do you still hope to pick up the occasional role here or there, or is that going to be your swan song, and you're just going to finish out however many years you are working here at Stephen F. Austin and helping other actors? What's in the near term for you?
Well, shooting a film in 2 weeks called Glenn's Gotta Go, and that's next. And then this coming week, I'm making a speech for graduation of a school. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I continue to live and thrive.
Well, I want to thank you for spending a couple of hours talking with me, Brad Maule. I will link to your page at the Stephen F. Austin University, as well as your IMDb page. So thank you for spending a Sunday afternoon with me.
Thank you.